Hello and welcome back to So You Got a Life Sci Degree. We're your hosts, Farida and Lisa, two life sci undergrad students trying to navigate our future careers. This is episode 3, and we're talking to Jessica Zhang about medical illustration and web design. How are you doing this week, Lisa?
I'm doing good. I went over to someone's house yesterday, and we were trying to do the blanket trick on her cat. So if you don't know, the blanket trick is when you stand kind of in a doorway and you place your pet directly in front of the doorway. Usually it's a dog, because you'll see why when I explain. They actually care about you. And then you lift the blanket over your face, and then you let it down, and you lift it again, and you let it down again. And then, so this is a blanket that covers your whole body. And then you kind of throw it in the air a little bit and you dart off to the side. So from the perspective of the pet, it looks like the blanket swallows up their owner, which if you're a dog is the most important person in the entire world to them. And so there's funny videos on YouTube about the pets just freaking out. And so we tried on her cat. We did it twice. And the first time, the cat, first of all, got distracted by me moving the phone from filming her doing the blanket trick to filming the cat. She got distracted by my slight movement of like 6 centimeters because she's a cat. And then the second time, she did pause, because the second time I only filmed her, so there was no movement, and she did go over to investigate the blanket, but we weren't sure if she was looking for her disappeared owner or if she was just investigating the blanket because it was in a new location. And we never really did a negative control, I suppose, which would have been just a blanket on its own. So yeah. And then I wanted to do it more times, but she was like, no, she gets it now. And I was like, I don't think so, but yeah. So yeah, that's how my week's been going. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm taking a computer science course this semester, which is a little bit out of my range of things I'm normally comfortable with. And we're learning how to program in like the command line, which is like the screen that shows up on all the hacker movies with like,
Oh my gosh, I actually know what that is.
yeah. It just makes me feel like such a legit programmer. I'm like alone in my room, but I wish I was like in public and someone would just like look at my screen and be like, wow, she's so legit.
I mean, honestly, that's like 20% of the reason I wanted to learn CS was just to be able to be cool.
Yeah, I think that's that's a big reason that most people want to learn how to program.
That's true. For us, I'm like, no, I just need to learn because biology and computers, Christ. Meanwhile, all the middle schoolers are like, yeah, but hacking NASA, bro. Like, so cool. Jessica is a freelance medical illustrator and front-end web developer based in Toronto. She currently works at Klick Health, a marketing agency and commercialization partner for life science brands. She completed her undergrad degree in life sciences at McMaster University, followed by a Master of Fine Arts in medical illustration at the Rochester Institute of Technology. As part of her transition to web development, she also attended Juno College of Technology. She's passionate about communicating science concepts through interactive online experiences. Thank you for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we just wanted to start off by asking if you could just give us a brief overview of your job.
Yeah, so my current title is Senior Web Developer, and we're just basically responsible for any sort of digital marketing, so like websites, banners, emails, etc. And I help out with the coding. As a senior, I do some of the planning.
Very cool.
Do you want to kind of explain to us, maybe first on a broad level, what a front-end web developer is? Because for context, my knowledge of coding and web development, all that stuff, even though both my parents do that, it is absolutely zero.
Yeah, so I think web development can be divided into front end and back end. And what front end is kind of what you see when you open a page. So how it looks, the functionality that you see, and yeah, like the colors, the designs, and how it's built is all considered front end. While back end is more of the database side, what happens when you submit a form, what happens to that form, and how it's stored, and how that information is used. That is all on the back end of it. So yeah, on the front end, I work with making the website look the way it does and function the way it does for the users.
You didn't start out in web development, and after your undergrad, you actually pursued medical illustration. Is that right? So do you want to talk us through a bit, like why you went into the undergrad that you did, and then how you got into medical illustration, and then how that kind of evolved to where you are today.
Yeah, so this is kind of a long story. I'll try to keep it brief. I went into undergrad to do life science because I really enjoyed biology in high school, and my parents also really wanted me to become a doctor.
Classic.
Yeah, but I think like one of my hobbies ever since I was young was drawing. So art was kind of always in my life, even though I wasn't pursuing it in school. And then throughout undergrad, I participated in a lot of like different student communities where I acted more along as a marketing coordinator. So I did a lot of their like designs, their posters, and advertisement, visual advertisement. So that's kind of where I discovered like, oh, I really enjoy this. And I think I saw more of a practical career in that than in science because I kind of thought like to pursue science, I had to pursue many more years of studying and school, and I wasn't sure if that was for me.
Hmm.
So, like throughout undergrad, I was pretty lost with what I wanted to do. And then towards the end of I think end of actually the beginning of my fourth year, that's when I discovered medical illustration, and I kind of instantly knew as I like the first time I saw those two words put together that that was something that I wanted to do, given like my background in science and like my continuous interest in art. And then yeah, that's kind of how I got into medical illustration. And then during grad school, as a medical illustrator, we focused a lot on interactive technology, which is kind of, I think, a huge part of the medical illustration industry, which is like interactive education for scientific concepts. And that was something that I focused my thesis on, that I spent a lot of time sort of self learning as well as taking elective courses in like computer science. And then after I graduated, I had a bit of a hard time finding a job in Toronto that was like stable and kind of fit the lifestyle that I wanted. So during some downtime, I went to Juno, and then yeah, I became a web developer.
Do you want to just tell us briefly what Juno is?
Yeah, Juno is a college of technology. At the time when I went, they were called Hacker U, so you may hear me refer to them as Hacker U. And at the time, they had part-time courses as well as this one full-time boot camp where it's a 12-week, 8 to 6 Monday to Friday course. But it was actually really amazing. Like it was an amazing experience for me because the culture and the way that they teach keeps you really engaged. So the 12 weeks went by so quickly for me. And then they basically teach you the like what you need to do to get into the front end web development industry. So basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then they kind of teach you how to build a portfolio and how to brand yourself. And then at the end of the program, they also help you look for a job.
That's really cool. So, yeah, we'll link that in the show notes if anyone wants to check that out.
For the yeah, you mentioned that in the when you were studying the medical illustration in grad school, they had a focus on the interactive platforms and that side of things. So, could you just explain what you mean by that? Like, is it mostly like articles, web pages, or how? What are some examples of that interactive technology of?
Yeah, so I think medical illustration is it's a very niche field, but it is pretty broad in terms of what it entails. A lot of people do illustrations, like the diagrams you see in textbooks, and then there's animations, where either for marketing or educational purposes, and then there's the interactive side, which can either be like a game. I think a lot of it is gamification, or it could just be a website that is more like an interactive learning platform. And what I focused on for my thesis was that I created a mobile game that was kind of like a shooter game, and then I made it into the theme of like a leukemia patient, and then you were a chemotherapy agent going through killing leukemia cells. So that was kind of like a gamification.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, like, what before you went into grad school for medical illustration, what do you think is like the level of skill that you had to have, or like, how did you ensure that you were up to par to pursue it as a career?
I think I've always been known in like high school and middle school as someone who like drew very well. But to be honest, when I first like I knew it in the middle of my fourth year, and then I took gap year to kind of improve. And then when I first discovered it, I like compared myself to the current students, and I was not up to par at all.
Mm.
I was interested, and like I asked a couple of my professors if I can do work for them, so I had a little bit of experience there. But like actual fine art technical skills, I was not up to par. So I took that year. During that year, I went to like a art school on the weekends, and kind of like really had to build up my portfolio and like my technical skills. But I think like the year really paid off, and like I think because I was also a little older, I picked it up a lot faster.
Older, you mean compared to.
The art school was pretty much dedicated to high school students that were pursuing an like art major in university.
Right. And so that was before, that was not the actual medical illustration program. That was just to prepare you and develop a portfolio so you could apply.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Yeah. So do you want to tell us a bit about the medical illustration program? I've heard it's pretty competitive to get in. I've also heard that there's not a lot of programs in Canada.
Yeah, so in Canada, there's just the one program at University of Toronto. And then in America, I don't know how many there is now, but when I was going, I think there's four.
Wow.
And each of the programs require either an undergrad in sciences or the arts. And if you have a science program, you need a couple of art credits. And if you have an art degree, then you need a couple of science credits. And then basically you submit your transcripts and then a portfolio. Some of the schools require like a few specific pieces, which is whether it's like life drawing or like specific themed pieces, as well as reference letters. Some schools require like GREs, others don't. But yeah, that's kind of the gist.
Okay. I know at McGill, like, I don't think we actually have programs dedicated specifically to like visual arts. Is that like kind of the art classes that you're talking about, or is it just any kind of.
Oh yeah, so in regards to that, like I couldn't take any studio art classes in McMaster either.
Okay.
And then RIT actually required you to take studio classes. So I took them during my gap year at UTM, but then I actually took classes outside of school to prepare my portfolio.
Okay. And then for your portfolio, what kind of pieces is it? Is there any more like on the web type coding pieces included, or is it more just like life drawing or things like that?
Yeah, so that's a long time ago. But it's all static pieces. I think mine was a combination of traditional art and digital art. So, but like traditional art, I just mean like still life or life drawings.
Okay.
Like they actually recommend you not to draw anything scientific or medical.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because just in case you made a mistake, that really takes away from your artwork as it is.
Like if you make a mistake, like you put the appendix in the wrong place.
Yeah, or like yeah, basically. Or if you're depicting a structure in a way that it's not supposed to. There are some common mistakes in medical illustration that we learned in grad school.
Oh.
So I think it's like if you made any of those mistakes, it just takes away from like a beautiful piece.
Oh, I understand. And then, so then while you were actually in that program, what are the sorts of things that you learned? What was that program like?
Yeah, so I would say it's like maybe 40% science based and 60% art based. Like science based, a huge course was human gross anatomy. So you go into a cadaver lab and you look at all the structures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is a very rewarding course, and obviously like something that not everyone gets to experience. And you really get to see in detail what the human body looks like. And then there's a couple of courses dedicated to just digital art and how to draw medical art digitally and things to focus on. And then there was a couple of courses on like interactive media, which is basic coding and what type of medical art can be done through that. And then a couple of courses on animation. And then I think you had like one or two electives a year.
So you've mentioned medical illustration, or sorry, you've mentioned medical diagrams or human anatomy a lot. Is the majority of medical illustration, whether it be animation or diagrams, is it largely based around human anatomy? Do you know anything about that?
I think it's very mixed. There is definitely a large portion that is based on human anatomy, more traditionally. But I think nowadays the hot field is more like molecular.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that that's pretty cool. So honestly, when Dr. Daniel mentioned medical illustration, I also thought that that was something I might be interested in.
Hmm.
I've always been pretty artsy. I still am.
Yeah, she sends me like cards in Montreal that are like super cute
Aww.
drawings. Yeah.
Yeah, I sent her little postcards. And when I first heard about the career, I was pretty interested in it. But I think I was pretty put off by the concept that I would be drawing a lot of diagrams about the human body, maybe because that isn't my favorite thing. But yeah, like it's good to hear that there are also medical illustration tasks that aren't just to do with drawing the appendix for textbooks.
Yeah, I actually feel like nowadays human gross anatomy art is not that common just because there's so many that are already done. So
Mm,
I think like if somebody needed a piece, they might just be able to get copyright licensing as opposed to commissioning an artist to draw it on its own.
right. Because the human body doesn't change much. It's like basically what it is.
So I guess along those same lines, like do you feel like the main topics of focus for the drawings have changed over time, and what do you think it's going towards or is right now?
I mean, I think now everything is digital. There are, of course, like if someone's looking to publish a book and they just want consistent art, there is like more gross anatomy. But I do think a lot of like real life projects are very like molecular pathways or the new research that comes up.
Okay. Would you mind just going through some of the projects that maybe you've worked on and some interesting ones that you've liked?
Yeah, so I think real life. I worked as a medical illustrator for about 6 months after I graduated, and I was doing patient education animations.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I was working for an agency that was working for, I want to say, nonprofit organizations that were promoting like pancreatic health, clinical trials, and such those kind of concepts.
Hmm.
So yeah, I worked on a couple of animations.
Very cool. So I think one thing that makes people hesitant to maybe pursue medical illustration as a career, even though they might be really interested, is just how consistently they can get work or how it might be kind of unpredictable. So could you speak a little on that? Like how accurate do you think that is or inaccurate?
I think that's very accurate, at least for me. There are definitely people who can get very stable jobs and they can work in a company for a very long time and grow with the company, but there are only so many jobs. I do think there are graduates that come out of these programs that are not able to find something stable right away because there's still a limit to the demand because I do think a lot of people are not aware of medical illustration as a field.
Do you mean they're not aware of it as a field, so they don't think to hire someone
Yeah,
in it?
like I think there are people out there who just don't know that you can hire someone to depict your research or, your the concept that you're trying to put out there.
Do you know about the nature of that work? Like, yeah, like some of it is freelance or contract based work, but I believe there's also medical illustrators that work for medical illustration companies.
Yeah, like Klick actually has their own team of medical illustrators that, live very like they have very stable jobs. There definitely are many companies that hire medical illustrators for full time. But like even then, I think those positions are very limited. And I think once they find a good medical illustrator, what are the chances of them being replaced, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
True. Yeah, do you have any approximations for like what percentage of people like work in full-time places versus on contract versus freelance? Like I totally would not expect you
Ooh.
to actually know, but just maybe guessing.
I don't because I'm not super involved with the Toronto community of medical illustrators, but I know based on, I think, my graduation class at RIT, we were 8 people, and I want to say half of us have full time medical illustration jobs.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That's more than I thought.
Yeah, same.
And then kind of talking a bit more about jobs and, like getting a job in the medical illustration industry. Now that you've perhaps, at least for the time being, transitioned a bit more to web development, do you think that's where you want to stay, or would you like to do more medical illustration work in the future?
I think full time wise, I love to continue being a web developer. I do love medical illustration as well, which is why I try to do freelance jobs on the side. But yeah, my focus is definitely on web development.
Do you want to tell us about some of the things you enjoy about web development?
Yeah, I think like one of the huge reasons why I did love medical illustration was the idea of like being creative with limitations, which I think also translates to like problem solving because you're
Mm,
given a concept and you have to use whatever you can to portray it in a visual way. And I think the problem solving part was something I was very interested in. So I think switching to web development where almost everything is based on problem solving, like I really like that kind of challenge.
Hmm.
So I really enjoy the tasks that web development gives me.
That sounds really interesting. Could you give us a more like concrete example of when you've done that or walk us through that a little?
For medical illustration or web development?
Either one, whichever one you want to do.
Okay, so for medical illustration, like something that's more of a problem solving is say you have an audience that is only for the younger audience, like a children audience. You're trying to explain to them what a disease is. So you don't want to be scary and you don't want to portray it too realistically, but you want to be accurate. So
Right.
you kind of have to work within what you know about your audience and the tools that you have. So maybe making a cell into a character with like eyes and making them talk and making them interact in a way where it's like still innocent, but you can tell what's happening in the disease. So I think that kind of like problem solving was something I was extremely interested in.
And then what about on the web development? And do you have any examples of problem solving?
Yeah, so I think like, for example, if I'm building a website, I have to build a website based on the creative files that were given to me, but I have to build it with clean code. I have to think about the performance. So if I were to create a website and make it very fancy, it might affect performance because it's
Right.
taking a lot of time to load, et cetera, et cetera. So I think like working within limitations to create the best product that you can, like I think that's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it.
And speaking about websites and creating things that are cool but also work well, I wanted to ask you a bit about the two websites that you have for yourself. We're going to mention them at the end just kind of as a plug for you, but I was looking at them on my own time, and so you have two. You have one that's more focused on your coding work and more one that's more focused on your medical illustration work.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I was just going through them and they just look so cool. They just I was so impressed, and your LinkedIn page is also really like it just is very professional and it kind of highlights your skills and everything. So I just want to ask you, how did you do that? And
I think it all starts like from school. Like in my medical illustration program, there's actually one course about business. So a lot of it taught us how to brand ourselves. I think that's very important when you're trying to make a website or something that just like puts you into the internet. As for the websites, my medical illustration website I started making it during my grad school, and we did have a course where the last assignment was to make your website for your career. So that's when that one started. And then when I went to Juno, the last project at Juno was to build your website for web development, which is
hmm.
how I have my second one.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. So you actually, and I'm assuming you just kept updating those throughout the years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I did want to ask you what the day to day just looks like in your job now and in your role. But also, you did mention that some of the work is around just like the business aspect. So what do you think the divide is between, business, marketing yourself versus actually doing the design work?
During my full time job, or?
Full time or when you're working freelance, like just what does your week look like, I guess?
Yeah, so I think for freelance, most of my stuff is set up. Like, to be very honest, I don't spend too much effort on it. It's just basically if older clients come back, then that's when I usually do my freelance work. But for my full-time job, I usually start the day around 8:30. But we're very flexible, the team. And then around 10, we have our daily team stand up, which is kind of like a team huddle where we share like what we're doing for the day, if we need help, if we have extra time and such. And then after that, I'm kind of heads down for a little bit to work on whatever project that I'm on. And then maybe I'll have a meeting or two throughout the day to talk about the projects with the project specific team. But yeah, and then I would say I spend probably 50 to 75% of my day heads down working on like my project, which is usually coding.
Okay, cool. And how much interaction is it just within your team, or do you have to interact with people in other parts of the company or with clients and things like that?
Yeah, so with Klick, like Klick is broken down into many different teams. And then within each team, there's like a technology department, a creative department, UX, etc., etc. So I'm part of a technology department. So that's when I say my team, I mean it's the technology. And then I work with people outside my team, like creative and UX, based on whatever project I'm working on. So for majority of my meetings, I have with outside my team, so the project specific teams.
Okay.
And then depending on the project, your level of interaction with the client also varies. So on my most recent project, the client was very involved. So I got to speak to the client almost every day to talk about like the progress, the status, and such.
I see. Yeah, it's good to know a bit about that.
Yeah, and then what do you think are like some of the things that are more challenging about the position that you're in now, and what are things that you generally like, or what are your favorite things about the position?
Yeah, so I'm very happy with my current position as a senior web developer. I think something in the technology field that everyone knows is that it's very fast paced. Lots of things are changing, new tech is coming out. And I do think keeping up is a slight challenge, but I think that challenge is something I do enjoy about my work.
Yeah, how do you deal with that? How do you stay on top of the tech? What are your strategies for that?
Yeah, so a lot of companies do support ongoing learning. So
Mm.
for me, when I first joined Klick, I started taking some extra courses on the side. I went to Ryerson for a computer application certificate. I would still be taking courses if they offer the one that I wanted right now, but I guess right now I'm on hold. But our team also has a lot of like lunch and learns where, you know, different members of the team will discuss the things that they've been reading up on or something that, they think everyone else would benefit from learning. There's also lots of conferences that often the company will like that there are also a lot of conferences where the company will send you to, or like if you express interest in something that you want to learn, the company definitely tries to like help you get there.
That's cool. Yeah, I think it's the same in life science or in research because there's constantly new methods of, DNA sequencing coming out
Mm-hmm.
or like, CRISPR which recently came out. So, I think when I was a kid, at least when I was like really young, I always thought of education or jobs as okay, you go to high school and then you go to university and you learn how to do the job and then you have all the knowledge you need to do the job and you do the job for the rest
Yeah.
of your life.
Yeah, I was definitely under that impression as well.
Yeah, right. But I think it's more like okay, you have the skills you need to start the job, but then you need to keep learning more or less for the rest of
Exactly.
your life.
Yeah, and I think like when I was in high school, I like considered computer science for a very brief moment, but then my parents were like, you have to keep learning. It's never gonna stop. And like, but to be honest, I feel like a good industry should be like that. Like
Yeah.
a career where you can grow should demand you to keep learning.
And I think it's funny that because they wanted you to be a doctor, but I should hope that doctors are continuously learning because healthcare evolves over 50 years,
Oh,
you
for
know?
sure. I think they just wanted me to sit in an office and just like like I don't know what their impression was, but
So looking back at like your whole career trajectory and all of that, is there anything that you would change about how you pursued the position you're in now?
so if I told me that like back in undergrad that I was going to be a web developer, did I need to do an entire life science degree and a master's in art? I like if I knew that at that time, I probably would have switched to computer science to be very honest.
Mhm.
But like I have no regrets. I wouldn't change it now just because I think those experiences were so valuable for me that like it really shaped me into who I am and
Mhm.
it really solidified a lot of my interests. So I wouldn't change it personally, but would I recommend this route for someone wanting to be a web developer? Probably no.
That's a good answer. Kind of on the same lines, if you're looking back or just thinking hypothetically about the future, are there any other kinds of careers that you can see yourself having pursued and also been successful at and happy in?
Oh, interesting question. Because I feel like I've spent so much time debating between medical illustration and web development that I've just never considered anything else.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty happy with the two choices that I currently
Yeah.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot. That's cool. And something we've asked in the past is there any advice you would give to a life science student who's interested in this? But I'm just going to ask you, do you have any advice for me because I'm a little bit interested in medical illustration, like seriously interested?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know, just do you have any advice for how to determine if it might be a good fit for me, and then if I think it is, how to go about pursuing that, because I haven't really taken any art courses in university, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, that's not too late at all. You definitely can pursue it, especially if you know that you're interested. I do think like having a strong interest is a huge benefit because you're just going to love what you learn and you're going to love your experience going through it. But I think one thing I wish people told me was that I think if you're going to be a medical illustrator, you might want to prepare for like starting your own business or going freelance full time. I think that's something that, like, I feel like if I was confident in starting my own business or just being a full-time freelancer, I would have continued to be a medical illustrator. But because I was so determined to have a typical like 9 to 5 life, that going into medical illustration and being in the real world kind of shocked me,
Right.
which kind of like triggered my transition into a web development.
Right. Which is fair, because people go like, "Oh, I don't want a 9 to 5," but there are good things about a 9 to 5. It's a stable schedule, it's a stable job, stable
Yeah.
income.
And I think especially when you first graduate, like if you're on your own, it can be really scary.
That's true. Yeah.
And like another thing, if you're doing work for yourself, is like you also have to manage that too. You don't just get to like be in a world where you're just drawing and researching, right? Like you also have to do the business side, which was something that like I also wasn't prepared for because I just wanted to be stuck in my own world and like create these pieces.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Not much from my side, but I love that you guys are doing this. I think if I
Aw.
had a resource like this when I was in my undergrad, my very windy road might have been a lot different. Yeah, like you guys are doing an amazing job, and thank you so much for having me.
No,
Aw,
thanks for
thank you.
coming. And also for the listeners, we did not pay her to say that.
All right. So just to let the listeners know, if you would like to learn more about Jessica's work, as we mentioned, you can check out codedbyjessica.com. That's a website that outlines her skills in web development. And then you can also visit medartbyjessica.com, and that showcases her medical illustration work. And as usual, we will link both of those websites in the show notes. All right. Thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you.
So, we wanted to take this moment to tell you about our Patreon. We're raising funds in order to help pay for our podcast hosting service, equipment upgrades, and our own website. If you head on over to patreon.com/so you got a life sci degree, you can view our 3 membership levels and the cool perks that come with them. For $1 a month, you can access bonus mini-casts, which are 5 to 10-minute episodes where we talk about the interesting shenanigans in our lives, including weird animal discoveries, like the truth behind blobfish. To check out this and our other perks, click on over to patreon.com/so you got a life sci degree. All right, how do you feel?
I think that's pretty cool. It's probably going to be one of our more unique interviews compared to like all the other positions we've like.
Really? Why do you say that?
It's just so different. Like I don't know. It's a lot. I guess it's a little bit less on the life size part of things.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because, I mean, we did interview one person who was more on the computer science side before, but that was for one of our practice rounds.
Yeah.
So,
but her job was
yeah.
like completely different from life sci now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess Jessica's still a little bit linked.
Yeah.
A little bit, because she still does freelance work for medical illustration for old clients.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what do you want to talk about first?
I think it's just like such a cool job. Like, yeah.
Wait, which one? The front end web development or the medical illustration?
I think both. Like anything designy. I'm kind of like, I know you're like actually considering this, and it's like I feel like you have it's a viable option for you because you are actually.
Oh, I see. I'm a viable level of cool for this job.
No, I don't think it's based on the coolness. I think it's based on your art ability.
No, but that's the same as I feel the same thing. Like Jessica said that she felt that her skills were so under what they needed to be when she was applying for the program.
Right.
And I feel like I'm even more below that. Like I'm not really like good at drawing. I just like doodling, and I'm artsy in general.
I disagree. I think you're probably at the level that she was at when she was going into the program, because
also, like, I think I could definitely develop my skills if I
I think if you go through the same thing of like developing your skills, you could get to an adequate level, because like you do have like a background in like art and stuff like when you're younger, and also
That's
you haven't
true.
like lost those abilities.
That's true. Yeah, and I keep up with like doing cute little things.
Yeah, but like for
Yeah.
me, it's not like I have that training at all. I just like was
Mm.
like okay at drawing like a while ago. But yeah, it's like not viable, but it still sounds so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when she said that, when she heard the term medical illustration, it just rang true to her.
Yeah.
I also kind of relate to that because I kind of had that experience when that professor, Dr. Daniel, mentioned. I was like, strokes chin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think for me, I'm thinking I don't know if it would match with like my physical abilities because
Yeah.
it's hard to dictate drawing. That doesn't really work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe if it works out and my hands get better, it
Yeah.
would be a viable option.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I thought one thing that's cool outside of just the work itself is like how kind of the workflow that she described of like her day just being like 50 to 70% like working on a project.
Mhm.
And that's like I feel like that's so different to like how a lot of knowledge workers work nowadays.
Oh, yeah?
And the
What do
work
you mean?
um like most people spend a lot of their time just like answering emails or on meetings and stuff like that. So like I would be so envious of a job that is just like 50 to 70% like getting to work on like just design stuff. And then
Mhm.
also the other satisfying part of that is that you get to have a finished product. Like you're like, yeah, I've
Mm.
completed this project. Look at how you can literally
Right.
visually see how amazing this thing turned out.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess in something like research, you don't really get that
I mean, you
unless
get
you're
like a
creating an
finished
abs.
paper or finished
Yeah,
product, but
yeah.
it's not someone who just looks at it, it's not apparent how like cool it is. Yeah.
Right. I guess also along the lines of what she does day to day, I thought it was interesting what she talked about. Well, what I really liked was the problem solving component of medical
Yeah.
illustration. And I found the same kind of challenge in web development. And I think that's interesting because, like, for example, I remember when I was doing debate as a club, I was thinking it's not so much the topics itself that I enjoy talking about, even though I did enjoy that. What I loved most about debate was like the logic of it.
Mhm.
And I think I see that same logic in research when you're like, what is a positive control? What is a negative control?
Yeah.
Like, if it does this but doesn't do that, then that means this, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting how different, like the same way of thinking can be applied to totally different fields.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of thinking about career choice. Like not like what topics interest you, but what kind of work, what kind of way of using your brain interests you.
Yeah, totally. I think
Yeah.
more broadly also I just really like the idea of like using constraints to like drive either creativity or like
Mm.
your way of working through things to kind of give
Mm.
structure to your work, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, I just think
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is a little disconcerting to hear about the jobs thing, though. I didn't know that it was so hard to find work in I assumed because the number of graduates each year was so tightly controlled.
Hmm.
I thought that the jobs would be easier to find, but I suppose not, according to her recount of it.
Yeah, totally. It's like I think that's the part that would be most off-putting for a career like this for me because I definitely, like knowing that I have stable work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, being in a constant influx of when is my next client going to be there, that's something that's I feel like
Yeah.
pretty stressful.
Right. That's something you definitely don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also on the flip side, to be devil's advocate for a minute there, I think the stability of a job is just like a little bit of a comforting lie. Like I don't think there's as much stability as people truly think.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like in a job you can just prop your feet up. Like there is some level of
Mm,
you
right.
should be constantly like a
On your
little
toes.
bit, yeah, on your toes for
Yeah.
sure.
Right. You don't want to get too comfortable. My mom worked at Ford for doing IT for them for their website or, various things.
Yeah.
And she worked there for 10 years doing contract work, but her contract was renewed every year.
Hmm.
And she got pretty comfortable in the job and she enjoyed it. She liked her coworkers there. And then they outsourced everything to India.
Hmm.
So they basically, let off everyone on her floor and she had to learn a bunch of the new programming languages and tech that had like popped up
Hmm.
in the 10-15 years since she had been keeping up with, the new stuff.
Right.
So, yeah. But, you know, she was able to do it. So
Yeah.
good on
Yeah.
her. Yeah. But yeah, talking about the job stability thing, I think I do want, I don't know. I'm kind of torn. To be honest, I can see myself living both lives. I actually kind of like the university lifestyle where you have a bit of a schedule, but it's not the same every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the ideal state is like for me at least. It's like I don't think I would want full autonomy over my schedule, but I also wouldn't want a lot of like someone else controlling my schedule.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think like yeah, the university professor schedule is like amazing because it's like you still have this structure of competition and like these things driving you to structure your day a little bit, but it's not like every minute is like dictated by someone else.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. I think I'm that same way with my university course selection too.
Mm.
What I liked about my program, I was like, okay, it's not like a life sci where I choose literally all my courses, but it's also I still get some choice, and I
Yeah.
think that's good for me
Yeah.
because it's too stressful otherwise.
Mhm.
Yeah. But it was interesting what you said that if you are okay with starting your own business or with having less job stability, you can, you know, still get a career in medical illustration. She made it seem like she just wasn't really suited or wasn't really, you know, into that kind of lifestyle, which is why she kind of transitioned.
Yeah, I think part of it might be like just like preparing yourself for that mindset. Um
Mm.
but going back to like what your mom like about the story about your mom and you know all the new tech and stuff that advanced while she was working in that position. One thing that Jessica was talking about was how they keep up with new tech in their field.
Yes.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting is how like team oriented that is. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just you going to figure out what's
Mm.
new. It's like it's very driven by the community that she's a part of in her company.
Right, right,
Yeah, and I think that really does make a big difference. And you see that in research all the time with your professors if you like attend
right.
talks and stuff like that. Like that's
Yeah.
a way easier way to learn things, I feel like, because I just feel like my brain power is like multiplied by 10 when I'm like around other people. Um yeah, I think it's just
Yeah.
it really drives your skills forward much faster than having to go through everything alone.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because when it's just the culture of the company that everyone is constantly learning thing, it's like almost kind of like part of the job.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
yeah, especially when it's integrated into your day, like you can do it during your like lunchtime, just like how I go to ecology seminars during my lunchtimes, you know.
Yeah. Wow, what a flex.
It's not a flex. I'm not even in ecology. I just go because I think animals are cute and I like learning about birds.
Uh-huh, yeah.
It's literally the truth. We've talked about this. We've talked about this. Those seminars have taught me that I am interested in ecological and evolutionary research, but that I don't want to do it myself. But I will continue to go because animals are cute and I like learning about them. And because I can actually follow those talks while also eating a sandwich.
Yeah,
Whereas
true, sure.
the mobile talks, I'm like, say what now
Yeah,
after
a
2 minutes?
full energy focus.
It, full energy focus and still lost after 5 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like in like mobile kind of seminars, you really need to have some domain knowledge, otherwise you're so lost so quickly.
Yeah, right? Like, they just can't catch you up in the 5 minutes intro, they just
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
Whereas someone in ecology can be like, "This is the yellow-beaked warbler. This is what he does."
Yeah,
And you're like, "Alright."
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I found it pretty reassuring that she mentioned different kinds of medical illustration work that aren't just human anatomy. I
yeah.
think that if I was going to go into this field, I would be interested in the molecular animation. I would definitely be interested in the animation part and in the interactive stuff,
Hmm.
even though I feel like that's a bit of a dangerous territory because I feel like that would probably involve coding.
Yeah, I think realistically, like if you're gonna go into this field, I don't think you can actually avoid coding. Like I do think it's gonna become a
That's true.
significant part of your job.
That's very true.
Yeah, but I thought it was so
Yeah.
amusing that I wasn't aware that she does things for like children or for the public that are more like cute and not
Mhm.
like just like what is this structure of the body? Yeah.
Right, right. I think we might have forgotten to mention this while we were talking in the interview, but a good example of interactive technology is this COVID-19 visualization tool that I saw some months back on Facebook and I shared it on my page. And it's just really cool. It's just a really good way to visualize the cases that you just can't do
Mhm.
with a static diagram.
Yeah.
And I am going to link that in the show notes because it's really cool. You should check it out.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot of data visualization stuff I've been super into. I mean, we could
mhm.
technically link some, but yeah, like
Yeah.
even outside of just science, like there's a 538 is I don't know if they're like necessarily a news site, but they do a lot of visualization. It started out for sports, but then it became like
Mhm,
more politics based.
mhm.
But yeah, they're really interesting and I like their art style.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Again, all like, stuff on the computer all seems like it would involve coding.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like so much of my goals in being a life science person is to not end up doing coding.
That's like yeah, but I really don't think
Okay, but like full time. Like I don't want to become like a full time. Like that's like my main thing. I don't mind if I'm doing science and I do like 20% coding on the side. Like
okay.
that's 20% of my job. But I just don't want to be like, oh, I did this and then that led me to this and now I do coding for
That's
like
yeah, I think that's a realistic goal of like
horizon.
20%, sure.
Yeah, yeah. And again, not that I think that's a bad job. Obviously, it's not. But I just for me, I don't think I would be happy in that kind of job personally. So yeah,
Yeah.
the apple is trying to fall as far away from the tree as possible, valiantly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I'll play the flip side is that yeah, I've been getting a little bit into coding and I'm loving it so far.
Oh,
So
are you really? You didn't
yeah.
tell me that. I mean,
Yeah.
I did a little bit of coding and I thought it was kind of interesting, but then it got hard and I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, it is a lot
So
of just banging your head against like the wall trying to fix
yeah, for
something.
sure. Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, when you're doing a physics problem and then it's like a bunch of calculations, like 20 calculations to get at the answer. And you do all the calculations and you get at the answer and it's wrong. And you realize you did something wrong in like the first like 3 calculations. So you redo those and you redo the whole thing and it's still wrong. And you repeat that like several times until you finally get to the right answer.
Yeah,
I feel
but
like
somehow
I do
it's
that a lot.
I still find it more fun than like physics problems.
Really? I liked physics. I don't know.
Yeah. I think there is also I like the culture like of I guess people like programming culture and stuff like that where
What do you
it's a
mean?
lot more like people willing to help each other. For some reason
Huh.
in science like when you ask someone about what their research is and I mean usually these are like students in the labs and stuff, it's a very like highbrow like oh this is my research and I'm going to explain it to you but you're definitely not going to understand. And I'm going to feel great from you not understanding. There's this like perverse mentality to it. Whereas programming people, everyone that I've interacted with so far, so the people I've interacted with so far are so willing to help. And like, I feel like that's a strong
Aw,
part of the community.
that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate a bit to the like head high, you won't
Yeah.
understand my senior thesis kind of thing. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think I'm good.
That is a wrap. So, this week we are introducing a new segment to our podcast, which is the trivia question. We've asked Jessica, our guest, to come up with a wacky, quirky little trivia question that we can read right now on the show. And we will also post it on our Facebook and our Twitter pages. We'll give you a week to think about the answer, maybe vote on what you think. And then a week later, we will release the answer on those same social media pages. So, here's our question for this week.
Right. So this week's question is what does the term rubber ducking refer to? A, the badly articulated questions a junior developer asks when first starting out in their career, as it just sounds like quack, quack, quack. B, the practice of sketching rubber ducks to improve one's knowledge of perspective. C,
Possible?
the practice of describing your problems to a rubber duck in hopes of arriving at a solution after speaking out loud.
What?
D, the method of cleaning one's acrylic paintbrushes by allowing them to float on water, letting the paint dissolve over time.
Which one could it be? Let us know what you think on Facebook and Twitter. This has been episode 3 of So You Got a Life Sci Degree with Jessica Zhang about medical illustration and web design. We want to give special thanks to our crew of lovely patrons, including our Little Leaf patron, Naeem. If you would like to support this podcast, you can visit our Patreon at patreon.com/soyougotalifescidegree or leave us a review on iTunes using the link in the show notes. The music you're listening to is No Regrets from audiohub.com. Thanks for listening and see you next time.